As I stated with the other cognitive functions, every cognitive function has a great deal to offer. It is of significant benefit to the person who is using it and the people that they affect when it is at its best and when it is being done well or used in good ways. But when a cognitive function is at its worst, it can be very detrimental to the person who's using it and to those around them. Um, when it comes to extroverted thinking, it tends to be at its worst under the same circumstances that every cognitive function tends to be at its worst. And that is when the user of it is so all in on that one cognitive function that function is dominating every aspect of that person's thought to such a degree that it influences every action, every word. It really controls the mind. And usually, when someone is so all in on a cognitive function that it is overwhelmingly controlling everything that he or she does, that person usually doesn't realize it. They just don't realize how over the top they are with that cognitive function. Extroverted thinking provides a great benefit to the world in that it is really dedicated to figuring things out and getting things done. And when it applies itself to the task of figuring something out and getting something done or accomplishing something, one of the beautiful things about extroverted thinking is that it does not just already have one way of doing things. It is really looking at ways of doing things on a spectrum and trying to figure out along the way which one is best. So the good news about that is that extroverted thinking will not just automatically, at least at the beginning, say, my way is the right way and the only way and do things my way. Extroverted thinking is going to be apt when it's first trying to figure out a problem or solve a problem. It's going to be apt to listen to ideas. It's going to be open to trying different possibilities. It's going to be willing to explore the different ways that something can be done because its primary concern is getting it done and making it work more so than figuring out how to get it done or make it work. So that is good. However, it plays out sometimes in some really not so good ways when extroverted thinking is at its worst. First of all, in those early stages of trying to figure out a problem, it's great that extroverted thinking wants to hear maybe multiple people's ideas, but it can sometimes be rather abusive in doing so. In other words, instead of doing what introverted thinking does, which is really the people who are all in on introverted thinking, when they have something to figure out, they will really go off by themselves and seclude themselves and do all of the research on their own. And they'll do an extremely deep dive into the topic to figure out the solution on their own. Then they'll come out to the group and say, hey, everybody, guess what? I figured it out. Extroverted thinking, instead of doing that, it wants to sort of poll the audience and figure out what everybody thinks on the matter. But the problem is sometimes it can do that in a very abusive way. Instead of just saying, kindly and passively, hey, tell me your thoughts on this, it can sometimes be over the top, in your face. Hey, I need to know what you think. What is your idea? What do you want to do on this? What have we tried? What have you tried? Do you have any thoughts on this? And sometimes sometimes that is the right approach, right? Sometimes the people who are involved are ready to open up and have a dialogue and share their thoughts and share their experiences and interact in such a way that as a group, everyone can figure out the problem. But sometimes people don't want to do that. Sometimes people want to be left alone. So having someone right there and sort of, all up in their business, basically saying, well, tell me what you think. Well, tell me how we should do this. Well, what are your thoughts? Sometimes that can be a bit much. And so extroverted thinking, when it is all in or at its worst, can sometimes be, it can almost feel sometimes like somebody's punching you in the face with their need for your information or for you to tell them what it is that they should do or how you have tried to figure something out. Another thing about extroverted thinking that I've noticed is that once it does finally find the way that works, it can be really stubborn on that way. And I think that might partly come from the idea that it has tried every way, right? Extroverted thinking has it's not done that super deep dive on figuring it out on its own like introverted thinking has. Introverted thinking, I think, sometimes will be stubborn in its way of doing things because it has spent so much time just analyzing on its own what is the right way that it comes out and says, okay, I know that this is right because I've analyzed it so thoroughly. Extroverted thinking is going to be more apt to say, well, I tried that way and that didn't work, and I tried that way and that didn't work, and I listened to those people and their way didn't work, and I listened to those people and their way didn't work, and I tried that way and I tried his way and I tried her way and I tried every way and I read these books and I attempted to figure this out in so many different ways. So then when I finally did figure it out, well, I'm not going to accept any other possible way of doing it because I've tried every other way there is, and I know that this way works. So when extroverted thinking has gotten to that point where it has now finally tried every possibility and said, okay, now I know the way that works, it's then not going to back off of that. And so when it sees other people doing things in a way that we'll say it knows don't work, it knows it has already tried that and that didn't work, that wasn't the best way, then it can be sort of punch you in the face belligerent with, you're doing it wrong, you need to do it the right way, you need to do it my way. And so extroverted thinking, I think at its worst overall, regardless of which stage of the problem solving aspect it is in, the real problem with extroverted thinking when it is over the top and at its worst is that it's kind of like, oh my gosh, leave me alone, abusive to everyone else. It doesn't shy away from sort of getting in someone else's face, whether it is to draw knowledge from them or whether it is to tell them how they should do things. And I think one of the biggest problems with extroverted thinking at its worst is that it sort of in that, let me get all of the ideas and then let me narrow down on a little bit on what is right. And then it kind of locks in on this is the way it's got to be done. It doesn't allow sometimes for people to be different. It doesn't allow for individuality. I think one of the problems that we see with extroverted thinking, and I think this is true to some extent of extroverted feeling too, when these cognitive functions are all in, especially when they're the top cognitive function and they're all in, it doesn't see sometimes the value in the individuality of the human beings. I think extroverted thinking sees great value in creating a system that works for everybody, figuring out a way that something can flow and everybody sort of fits in and benefits from it. Now, that's noble and that's good, but it chokes out identity. Some people don't want to be cogs in a machine. And so I think that extroverted thinking, especially when it's at the top and when it's over the top and all in, it cares very much about equality. It cares very much about everybody having the same opportunity or everybody getting a fair share to an extent. Or maybe a better way of saying that is creating a system that works for everybody and gives everybody the opportunity to be equal. And then people who are very individualistic, like people who are IPs, let's say, or even maybe EPs can be, extroverted thinking could see that as sort of a threat against the system that is being created to theoretically equally benefit everyone or work for everyone. And so extroverted thinking, I think sometimes when it's all in, when it's at its worst, it's going to want everybody to see, hey, we have created something. We've created a system here that works. Everybody just needs to fall in line and get in their place and sort of become someone who plays their part in the big scheme so that this will work for everybody. And the problem with that is the people who are more identity focused than group focused, the people who are more self above tribe, as Dave and Shannon put it in Objective Personality, they're not going to take too kindly to that. IPs and oftentimes EPs, they don't want to be cogs in a machine. And so extroverted thinking at its worst is going to, I think, fail sometimes to see the value that people provide when they don't fall in line, or when they don't want to just be a part of a bigger system, when they want to break away and be on their own. I think that for extroverted thinking, that can really be looked at as a threat to the ability to make something work for everyone when someone doesn't play along, when someone doesn't play their part. But extroverted thinking, um, while it provides this phenomenal benefit of trying to figure out ways to make things work for everybody, it also, if at its worst, really needs to, I would say, open up to the realization that not everybody is interested in that kind of a society. Not everyone is interested in being part of a system that just asks everyone to fall in line and do their part so that everything can work. Extroverted thinking, I believe, is so valuable. I believe that it is the reason why so many things get done and get done well. But as with all of the cognitive functions, when it's overdone, it can be problematic, and being a little too in people's face, being a little too demanding, a little too abusive, a little too unwilling to see the value of the person who sets him or herself apart from everyone else, a little too wanting everybody to just sort of fall in line with the machine. What I think ultimately comes out of that is, over a long period of time, when people are all in on extroverted thinking, they really sort of, I think, alienate the people in their lives. I think over time, the people in their lives can feel a little abused, a little beaten up. They can feel like their identity and their individuality is not being respected. And so I think one of the problems for people who have extroverted thinking at its worst is that they can find themselves in a situation where people are avoiding them. People are abandoning them, perhaps. And I think frequently they won't know why. And the reason that I think they won't know why is because in their mind, they've put so much effort and so much energy in their lives into doing things on behalf of other people, trying to make things work. Like I could see the extroverted thinking user at its worst saying, I've done so much for you. I've tried to make things work for you. I've spent so many hours or so much money or so much energy on making everything good for you. The only problem is that the person that's being spoken to there probably never asked them to do that. The other person could say, but I never asked you to spend that time. I never asked you to spend that energy. I never asked you to spend that money trying to make things work for me. So when the extroverted thinking at its worst person thinks about all the things that he or she has done for everyone, right? I've done all these things for you. I think then somewhere inside they sort of expect reciprocation. They expect people to sort of give back to them because they've given so much. But how that often comes off to other people is just, you're very demanding. You, the extroverted thinking at its worst user, are just very demanding of me. You demand that I do things a certain way, and then you hold it over on my head that you've done all these things for me. But in reality, I never asked you to do all those things. And the fact that you want reciprocation or repayment causes me to sort of be repelled and want to draw away. I think that extroverted thinking at its best gets things done, and can get things done in a way where it doesn't have to go off in its room like introverted thinking for 5 years and then come out and go, hey guys, I found the answer. It's willing to move. It's willing to go try things. It's willing to just get out there, put itself out there and figure it out. And when it figures it out, it accomplishes awesome things, which is amazing. but it needs to learn to respect other people's privacy, identity, time, freedom, and be willing to allow other people to not be a part of the system if those people don't want to, and realize that that's okay. Thank you so much for watching. Do please click the little like button if you found this informational, entertaining, useful, whatever. Please subscribe if you have not already. I would really appreciate that. And I hope you have an awesome day. Bye now.